We're not talking about a few errors. We're not talking about occasional lapses. We are talking about a body of egregiously false information at the heart of the domestic violence movement. False claims are pervasive. False claims are not the exception, they're the rule.
Hey everybody, listen up.
Listen up, guys.
Hey guys, listen up.
Hear that? You're being told to pay attention. You're being told by men better than you, smarter than you, more successful than you, better dressed and richer than you to pay attention. So listen up.
Guys.
Hey guys, listen up.
Sit up straight and listen up.
No one should ever hit a woman.
No one should ever hit another human being. No one should ever hit a woman.
No one should ever hit a woman.
Not their wife, not their girlfriend, not their...
They are uniquely the people who should be protected from violence. Men should not be protected from violence. And in fact, if a woman hits you,
no one should ever hit a woman.
You're not allowed to defend yourself. Do you get it?
No woman should have to fear violence.
Especially not from someone they know and trust.
You don't count. Violence against you doesn't count as violence. That's comedy.
No one should ever hit a woman.
In spite of the fact that more men than women are subject to violence, we're going to make this exclusive. No one should ever hit a woman.
No woman should have to fear violence.
Especially not from someone they know and trust.
Because we're going to pretend that domestic violence is a sexually directional problem, even though it's not.
No woman should have to fear violence.
This message being portrayed to you is going to pretend that it is one directional. It is going to pretend, engage in the game of pretend, that it is only men beating on women.
Growing up, I was ashamed and afraid of my father when he abused my mom.
Because we're engaging in pretend, and now you should feel shame. Not because you did any violence, but because you're male.
I was ashamed and afraid of my...
You should feel shame and remorse, not for anything that you did, but because you're male.
I was ashamed and afraid of my father.
We want you to feel ashamed of yourself for your male identity.
Is when a man raises his hand to hurt a woman. We all have to take responsibility. So if you see someone threatening a woman, step up.
Yeah, because your role, as defined by the public, is to be the public bodyguard of everybody else, putting yourself at risk.
So if you see someone threatening a woman, step up.
Don't define yourself. Don't say I'm a human being with value of my own because I'm a human. No. Only buy into the ideal of a man that is of public benefit to other people and is of hazard to yourself.
So step up.
Step up. Put yourself in harm's way. And if you see a man being subject to violence, don't do anything about that because he probably deserves it. If you see a man being subject to violence, particularly violence done by a woman, just in your imagination, craft a story in which he deserves to be subject to violence. And for God's sakes, don't define yourself as a human being if you're male, a human of value who deserves to be allowed to live without being subject to violence or put on the firing line for someone else's benefit.
The worst abuse of power is when a man raises his hand to hurt a woman.
Actually, I think the worst abuse of power is when publicly elected officials who have access to all the information on a topic will publicly lie about that issue, which will perpetuate violence like the one that Joe Biden is telling you. Perpetuating a myth. The myth that it is male on female exclusively, and not the reality that domestic violence occurs within violent relationships and men and women are equally abusive towards each other.
This would probably 80% of the women coming in. Well, as it is, 62%, let's say, because those I could actually document. Those women were either more violent than the men they left, or the violence was consensual. Indeed, she was battered, she was bruised, and in many cases those were the worst beatings, but she was just as violent as he was. So the violence was consensual. It wasn't just on one side. Both sides were violent. But she was just as violent as he was. So the violence was consensual. It wasn't just on one side. Both sides were violent, and both sides had an input into that violent relationship that played backwards and forwards.
So why would Joe Biden, the author of the Violence Against Women Act, and President Barack Obama lie? Why would they lie about domestic violence if their lie is going to perpetuate it and keep it rolling, make sure the violence continues to happen? Well, because more than 50% of the registered and participating voters are female. And if you tell people they're better than other people, you win their favor, especially if they're infantilized, childish, intellectually undeveloped. You tell them, you're better, you're less violent, you're special, you're victims. And that's how they get reelected. By flattering the voters, by lying to them, telling them comforting lies. Now, the domestic violence grievance industry, which is a money-making industry, also has a motivation to lie. It's not to get reelected, obviously, because they're not an elected body. It's to keep the money flowing. Because the story that domestic violence is just men beating on just women rather than reciprocal, rather than multi-directional violence by violent individuals in dysfunctional relationships, and that violence fueled by, say, alcoholism, drug addiction, bad socialization, poor coping skills, mental illness, and a host of other problems causing domestic violence. Now, the simplified but false narrative that it's just men beating on just women, that is a simple story that tugs on everyone's heartstrings and provides easy and quick access to their wallets for donation. So it's for the money, honey. It's not to stop violence. And the fact that they're telling a dysfunctional and false narrative and using that false narrative in their programs to supposedly reduce violence, that is to make sure the violence continues so they continue to get funding. Or you can just go along with the comfortable lie, feel better about yourself if you're female, and feel guilty and miserable, and ultimately, if you're smart enough to realize you're being lied to, angry if you're male. But if you're a woman and you're intelligent, then you should also feel a little bit angry, because this perpetuation of a lie, this myth, and the structuring of anti-violence programs based on a myth is a guarantee that the violence will continue to happen. It's like, literally, it's like trying to fight a house fire and pouring water on only the south and the east-facing walls and letting the other two walls burn freely.
We're not talking about a few errors. We're not talking about occasional lapses. We are talking about a body of egregiously false information at the heart of the domestic violence movement. False claims are pervasive. False claims are not the exception, they're the rule.
Thanks for watching.